Welcome to Anchovy Verse. I'm Steve Cranfield, and I'm here to talk to you about my new collection of poetry, Keats's Anchovy. And by way of introduction to it, I'm going to share one of the poems in the book. As I do that, I hope I'll let you in on some of the trade secrets as to what goes into a short poem. It's called The Horsehead of the Moon Goddess. Well, what on earth is going on there? Well, I'll explain. So here is what I'm going to be talking about, what goes into a poem, particularly this one, and specifically what do the Parthenon marbles John Keats, Mick Jagger and Tesco have in common. As I said, it's from my new book, Keats's Anchovy. There's the lovely cover there with cover art by Andrea Asti. So let's open the tin and see what's inside. Here's the poem concerned, Horsehead of the Moon Goddess. I'll read it first. He'd been the chauffeur to celebrities, dragging the stars to their dawn demise and unwilling sleep. The coke-flared nostrils, the backseat shenanigans, the Gucci shades veiling the opening of the morning's eye. 12-hour shifts made for a dizzy arc from selenite rise to see the boss tucked in. Stanco da morire, but not just yet. Dexterity and grace sufficed the final mile. So let's start off with the Moon Goddess. Who is the Moon Goddess? The Moon Goddess is Selene, and here you can see a sarcophagus sculpture of Selene riding the chariot of horses that she rides through the night. She starts off on one part of the horizon and finishes at the end, and she was the kind of counterpart of Apollo, who was the sun god. So Selene was the Moon Goddess, and you can see that kind of crescent moon on her head there. That's who she is. And who is the Horsehead? Well, the Horsehead was one of the horses, and if you're lucky or fortunate enough to be able to go into the British Museum, you'll be able to see this creature here, who is a horsehead, who is presumed to be the horse that drives Selene through the night and back to the dawn. And I've seen this sculpture a few times, and most recently I saw it during lockdown, and it was in an interesting environment because in the room where it's housed, they had opened all the doors to make it safe for ventilation. And having opened the central door of the large room where this sculpture is contained, I could see the back of my office where I work, where I would normally work, but of course I wasn't working there during lockdown. And of course I knew this object was on the other side of the wall somewhere in the British Museum, but I hadn't really realised just how close I was to this object in my everyday work, but for the walls separating us. I find this object a very moving object. I think it's very poignant, not just in the fact that it's a fragment, but also it's such a lifelike and vibrant and living piece of sculpture. It's absolutely stunning. If you have the chance to look at it in person, please do. It is a remarkable object. But the additional thing is that I'm not the only person who's ever been impressed by this object. Many people have. One of whom was John Keats. John Keats was so impressed by this sculpture and the ensemble that it forms part of, that he wrote a poem about it called On Seeing the Elgin Marvels. I've just reproduced it there from the Poetry Foundation, and you can see there that I've underlined a couple of phrases because I've actually pinched them. The opening of the morning's eye and dizzy. So I've used those in my own poem. Now, of course, the poem that I'm talking about, my own one, is far removed from the classic dignity both of the original sculpture and also the poem that Keats wrote about it. So what's that all about? Well, one of the things I was thinking about as I was writing the poem was about the people who would be transported in this carriage during the night. And I was reminded as I was writing of it of a photograph called Swinging London 67 by Richard Hamilton. And it shows a photograph of, turned into a painting, where Jagger and a friend of his were appearing in court accused of possession of marijuana. I think this is such an apt image for bad behaviour of the 1960s, even though they're dressed for the court in an uncharacteristic suit and tie. But again, that was the kind of thing I was thinking about, particularly with the hands across the eye, with this image that Keats had about veiling yourself from the morning's eye. So again, that's the kind of atmosphere I thought would be going on in the back of a carriage or cart in my poem. But there's also another thing involved here, because at the end of the poem I talk about the final mile. Now, the final mile is a term that's used in delivery circles for that extra bit of customer care that will get your product delivered to them in a van. And that's something that struck in my mind, because I'd been working with some people who had been looking at driver safety training, and how the concept of the final mile, that bit that gets you over the final bit of the hurdle before you reach the customer, and what might go right or wrong in that final mile, struck me as quite an interesting analogy for the effort that people have to make, particularly during lockdown, to get things to the customers by hook or by crook. So let's look at the poem again with those little tours around culture and environment added in. Let's read it again. Horsehead of the Moon Goddess. He'd been the chauffeur to celebrities, dragging the stars to their dawn demise and unwilling sleep. The coke-flared nostrils, the backseat shenanigans, the Gucci shades veiling the opening of the morning's eye. 12-hour shifts made for a dizzy arc from selenite rise to see the boss tucked in. Stanco da morire, but not just yet. Dexterity and grace sufficed the final mile. I haven't said everything about this poem. I've not explained why there's an Italian phrase there. We might speculate on why that's there. But I suppose in some respects the poem is about poetry itself. Poets have a demanding and sometimes badly behaved boss to try to work for. They do their best, they try to do a good job, but is the work ever finished? It always seems that though there's something extra to do, there's always that final mile to go. So there you are, Horsehead of the Moon Goddess. It's printed in Keats' Anchovy. The book is available on Amazon, and you can visit my website, stevecranfield.co.uk, for further information about the book itself. Thank you.